I have been bracing myself for this chapter for a while. I know in my previous chapter summaries I have said, please don't let anything bad happen to her, but she's a mom in a One Piece flashback. What did I think was going to happen? So, hello Internet, I am the hero of Julios, once again with another One Piece chapter summary. This week's chapter is chapter 1167, Ida's Sons. Yeah, with a title like that, you can only guess what the subject matter is going to be. But let's get into the artwork to begin with. Sorry for last week, I forgot to mention the artwork. I did make a little note in the video itself, but this week's artwork is a request for a cat stealing some books and Nojiko and Genzo scolding the cat, but not really scolding the cat because obviously the way the cat's drawn, the way the two of them look upon this kitty, you do see there's a lot of Nami in this cat burglar Nami. It all fits together. It's very cute. And yeah, just another, cute little One Piece fan request. So let's get into the actual chapter itself. We do a lot of time jumping post God Valley. So the God Valley incident has occurred, and in this chapter we're going to be jumping a couple places in time in order to get us closer to catching up to the modern day. So yes, I want to remind everybody, because it's been a little bit since we've discussed this subject matter, this is Loki's flashback. This is Loki's story. I know it started off with Loki saying, okay, it all started when my father invited me back to the kingdom of Pangaea. And he got, or not Pangaea, that's the Maryjois. It was when my father invited me back to the castle in Elbaf. And he got there and he was like, okay, old man, what do you want? Oh my goodness. And he saw his dad being stabbed by 100 dudes. And then it said, this is a Rox flashback now, and we got to see the life and adventures of Rox D. Zebek and all the crazy things that happened, and Harold, and the fights, and then the God Valley, and then the big tentacle monster, and then the spider stomps that actually did what they were supposed to do, and now we're finally back to modern day. Or, not modern day, but Loki day. We're almost there. This starts off 5 years after the God Valley incident, which was 33 years ago. We see that there are whispers across the nations, across the world, that there are pirate ships. And, by the way it's narrated, maybe some other kinds of ships, but mostly pirate ships, being randomly attacked by a shadowy figure that comes out of the mist, destroys the ship, and then leaves just as quickly as it came. And at first, a lot of people are asking, were you sailing near the Florian Triangle by chance? And they say, no, that's not exactly where we were. But one thing that they all have in common is it is a gigantic figure who looks human. This turns out to be Harold, because Harold has made a pact with the Holy Land, with Maryjois, a promise to become one of their blades of the devoted. The narrator then goes on to tell us that after this contract was made by Harold, we cut a couple decades ahead in the future as powerful members of Rox's crew are making names for themselves, other pirates are fighting for territory, and through it all, the king of the pirates circumnavigated the globe, found the One Piece, and was promptly executed for his crime of being a pirate. This only served to spur more pirates into the ocean, which then resulted in giants finally being enlisted into the Marines. Thanks to his noble efforts, Harold has been welcomed in to what is known as a Shallows Covenant. Shallows as in like the shallow end of like the ocean tide. This is a mark represented on his arm, the same mark that we saw on Shanks's arm, the same mark that we saw on Somers, although Somers does look different, and we are going to get into that because the five elders proceed to explain to him that the Shallows Covenant is a promise. It is a tattoo of some sort or a mark of some sort that promises you are a devoted blade of the true God of this world, and eventually, if you're a good little giant, you will be allowed to make a different kind of covenant. I believe these are called, let me double check, Depths and Abyssal Covenants, which are reserved for 13 individuals. So there was a translation made by fans earlier that was kind of vague on the wording of this, and Viz, I think, is a little more clear about it. But the way it seems to be worded is that the Shallows Covenant is for anyone. Like anyone who promises that they want to become one of the Holy Knights, they get this Shallows Covenant, which I'm not sure if the mark connects you to Eam, because it's not like Harold seems to know anything about Eam. I think it's more of just like a straight up tattoo. I don't think it's actually anything dark or magical or anything of that nature yet. But the way this seems to be worded is 13 individuals get to be part of the Depths and Abyssal Covenant. Whether or not that means all 13 of them are the combined number of Depths plus Abyssal contractors, or if it means that maybe like the 5 elders plus 8 holy knights make up the full contract, and the 5 elders are the Abyssal, and then the holy knights themselves are the Depths. So I'm not exactly sure. The wording is kind of vague. I don't know if Oda vagued it himself just to keep it open-ended, or if maybe there's not really a huge difference except for level of authority. Eam does seem to be able to possess and teleport God's Knights just as he was able to possess and teleport Elders. So the level of control Eam has over them doesn't seem to change. So I don't know exactly. It might just be an authority thing, regardless of whether or not you get powers or not. It's also important to note that Harold is allowed to come and go from the Holy Land as he pleases now, but he is not allowed to speak of anything that happens while he's in the Holy Land, or of any of the missions he is assigned. This means he can go back to Elbaf and say hello to people, but he can't talk about his job. It's very what's the term? It's a non-disclosure agreement. That's what it is. You know that your dad has a job. He's just not allowed to talk about it. So, that was 33 years ago. We are jumping ahead in time to 20 years ago, where we see Harold having a wonderful conversation with his dear friend, King Neptune. Yes, Neptune and Harold were apparently friends. It actually kind of makes sense. At this time, they were both kings of races that weren't viewed as people. They were viewed as either monsters or fish, respectively. It would make sense that these two would hang out if given the opportunity to. Not exactly sure how the two of them met. Maybe Neptune was, he was a warrior at some point. Maybe there was a clash. Whatever the reason, the two of them are having a great time together, talking about adventures, having good laughs, and Harold then tells him about Loki, and Neptune's listening, and he goes, you say this Loki boy is a bit of a demon, but bro, is he any different than you were as a kid? And Harold thinks back to the man he was before Ida punched him in the face, and he's like, yeah, I guess if you put it that way, maybe you're right. Maybe Loki will grow out of it, and he'll turn out to be a pretty good guy, too. Well, so you're right, Neptune. And Neptune says, on that note, speaking of kids, I'm going to have a daughter soon, according to a soothsayer, according to, we know it's Madame Charlie, but she was just a little girl at the time. I'm going to have a daughter in 4 years, and she's apparently going to have some terrifying and horrifying power beyond the comprehension of anyone involved. So maybe they'd make a pretty good match together, And this is a very common thing for royalty to do, is betrothed their children to each other. So Harold is listening and he goes, you know what? With a crazy power like that, matched with Loki's crazy strength, maybe they would make a pretty good match. You know what? I'll drink to that. To my demon son Loki and your very shaggy daughter. And obviously Neptune says she's not going to be shaggy, bro. Just because I'm hairy doesn't mean my daughter's going to be hairy. What I want to point out here is the use of the word shaggy, which happens to be the nickname of Loki's little friend in the transponder snail. Currently where we're at in the anime, which I believe is Egghead at the time of the recording of this video, Loki hasn't been shown yet. Loki's transponder snail pen pal buddy hasn't been heard yet, so we don't know if the voice is male or female, but we do know that Loki calls this individual Shaggy. So it's entirely possible that Shirahoshi, of all people, might actually be the person on the other end of this line. I will focus more on this relationship later, because after this little promise, we see that Harold asks Saul to open up a school on Elbaf by, adding all the books from the Library of Ohara, as well as just all the information that the Giants already had, because Harold is trying to bring the Giants towards a more peaceful, era. This was 20 years ago, which means just 2 years before that, Saul survived the incident on Ohara, which means, unbeknownst to Saul, Robin is out there. Well, I guess, it depends on how much news. No, I mean, the news gets there, because we saw Loki cry about rocks. So that means Saul knew that Robin was alive. I guess Saul really didn't have the means to go and find her. Yeah, I guess if I really think about it, even if Saul wanted to, what was he going to do? Gather up some giants of Elbaf and go find Robin? She could literally be anywhere. He's in Elbaf in the New World. Last he checked, Robin is all the way in Ohara, or at least an island nearby. Unfortunately, that might just be the reason, and by the time Saul did find out a way, it would be, well, I assume she's safe until I see her again. But we jump once again through time to 15 years ago, to a certain Fisher Tiger making his way through Maryjois. Because remember, Fisher Tiger was a slave for a while before he ended up getting freed, and then he went back to free slaves himself. I'm not really sure if, because I don't know the exact time period between what happened there. We know Fisher Tiger was freed, and he went back to Fishman Island, and then he went back to Maryjois, but we don't know how much time passes between all that stuff. Anyways, Fisher Tiger is currently running away, and a mysterious one-eyed stranger, or at least one-eyed according to the silhouette that we saw, slices the chains off of him, breaks his slave collar, and tells him, I unlocked the armory for you. Do with that what you will, toodaloo. And leaves. We then see Sandersonia telling Boa Hancock that we are getting out of here. Someone's freeing us. And then we see Koala getting freed as well. And through this all, the incident that was the freeing of the slaves, the raid on Maryjois, the first horrible thing that ever happened to that place since an iron giant stomped around 200 years ago. And we don't know who this individual is. I will argue that the silhouette does look like Mihawk. It's very strikingly similar. And Mihawk was present at the execution of Gold Roger, so we know he was a pirate to an extent. The other possibility is Shanks. And I will explain that because we cut to a little after this. I think it was just the next day, because Harold is talking to Sommers, the greatest of the God's Knights. And Sommers is telling him, about the incident. All the slaves got freed. My lobster was slightly undercooked, and I'm really upset about that. And Harold goes, man, that seems like a pretty rough night for you guys. And he goes, yeah, Obviously, it was an inside job. Somebody unlocked the armory. We are going to do our best to find that rat. The word rat is a very interesting word in the One Piece community, as I'm sure a lot of you know, that there was a big theory long time ago, in the ancient year of 2024, before we knew about Shamrock. Shanks was also known as the Rat, because there was a big theory that Shanks was the reason that the Straw Hats got separated, or Shanks was the one who told on the Five Elders, or Shanks was the one who let this happen, and that Shanks was secretly an evil celestial dragon all along, and that he was the rat that was making sure every bad thing that happened. So the fact that the word rat was used to signify a traitor, now this could just be Viz translating, any kind of insult, or maybe Oda is winking at the audience about this meme-ish theory that's been floating around the world, though I'm not really sure how much of our theories Oda actually listens to. Especially when you consider that Oda doesn't have a social media account, it's all his assistants and his editors, but it doesn't mean his assistants and editors don't tell him these jokes when they happen. So as Sommers continues to whine and complain about the rat among them, Garling decides to tell Harold, "Hey, come over here, Harold. I would like to introduce you to my other son, Shanks, who has returned to us after a long, arduous life down below." Harold kneels down to Shanks and he says, I got to admit, I said this when I met your brother Shamrock, but you look really familiar. Have we met before? And that is when Shanks tells him, "You are a lowly surface world peasant. Don't talk to me. Goodbye." Now, it's a little confusing, but see, this is where it gets interesting, because Shanks, if it was like, "Oh, you look familiar, have we met before?" and Shanks was the one who last night, wrecked Mary Joie and did whatever, but then Harold wouldn't have seen him, because it was Fisher Tiger who saw him. And the fact that he says it to Shamrock as well, the real question now, we've had this long running theory of who is Shanks, what is Shanks' lineage. Then we saw Film Red and the whole Figureland thing, and we were like, Shanks is a Figureland, which means he's a celestial dragon. And then we saw Garling, and we're like, Garling Figureland, or Figureland Garling, depending on which translation you're using. Well, he is a celestial dragon, which means Shanks has to be a celestial dragon. And then we saw Shamrock, and now I just realized during the whole God Valley incident that Shanks' mom was silhouetted, as Oda loves to do. But in this silhouette, we don't know what Shanks' mom looks like, or who she is, or why Harold would think Shanks and Shamrock are recognizable. Because Garling didn't meet Harold until Harold became a devotee. Because if they had met before that, then Harold would have seen the horrors of God Valley and wouldn't be doing what he's doing right now. So who is Shanks' mom, and why is she plot relevant? Unless, of course, she isn't, but then it's the red hair. It's got to be the red hair. That has to be the reason, because Oda focused on that when the audience, or not the audience, the people of the island, they saw Shanks' mom, they saw the little babies, and they said, "Oh my goodness, they have your red hair." Shanks calls himself the captain of the red-haired pirates. Shanks' mom might be important. That's really what I'm getting at here. But as he brushes off Harold and he goes walking with his brother, he tells his brother, "Hey, you have got to start showing me around here. You got to tell me more about this place. I have wasted the last 24 years of my life in that stupid lower sea level with all those idiots and failures, and I hated every minute I was down there. I always knew I was different. I always knew I was better than them. But also, we're 15 years ago. I mean, 3 years from now, this is the same guy that said, "Don't you hurt my friends." This is the same guy 3 years from now who said, "Luffy, it's just an arm. I'm just glad you're safe." This is the same Shanks who 3 years from this moment is going to be drinking and laughing and hanging out with lower level Blue Sea people. Who is this man? And what is his plan? But that's all we get to see from Shanks. Now we cut to my least favorite part of this chapter. Meanwhile, on Elbaf, Ida is sick. She is bedridden. She ain't getting much better. She tells Mato, I want you to take over the inn. Do that for me until I get better. And the doctor says, this is beyond my medical expertise. Can we like call Harold? He's like traveling the world right now. We could ask him to find a doctor. And Ida says, no. I'm feeling better. I promise. I just need a little time to get better. We don't need to bother Harold with this. To which I agree with the doctor that's talking to Ida. What is the point of worldwide connections if you can't use it to find a doctor for your wife? The doctor even goes to tell her every time Harold comes home, he goes to every elder in every village and tells them, let me marry Ida. Let me make this woman my wife. This woman has been nothing but wonderful. I mean, yes, mom in a One Piece flashback, but even by moms in a One Piece flashback standards, Ida is best girl. I'm sorry. I really like Ida. I am really upset because I knew this was gonna happen. But you know who didn't know this was gonna happen? Loki and Haruden. Because as Ida is sick in bed, the doctor tells her, your son Haruden is off searching for a doctor with his crew, and then they hear a big crash as they look outside, and Loki is sitting proudly atop this giant bull that he slaughtered, and he says, hey, guys, cook this up for the foreign hag lady, because her bar is my favorite bar to hang out. I really like that place. So even Loki has this chipper attitude around Ida these days. It's not a, shut up, you're not my real mom. He's like, I brought meat to make you feel better. This is the most Luffy thing I have seen Loki do so far. He was like, when I'm sick, I eat. So when she's sick, we all eat. But with that, Ida does confirm that she loves her two sons. She is loved by her two sons, and this is all she's wanted. Her little bar that helps traveling sailors become more friendly to the giants, her two sons getting along, Harold out there making the world a more peaceful place. I know she's going to pass away, but at least she's gonna pass away happy. But also she didn't have to. Because Loki, while traveling across Elbaf like he does, goes to the hometown of Estrid, his biological mother, and her family of gold diggers. They're all horrible. As they come up to Loki and they say, hey, Loki, true prince of Elbaf, it's me, your stupid shady uncle, and your shady aunt, and your shady cousin twice removed. We don't want this foreigner becoming our queen. No. Estrid was the true queen of Elbaf, and we've decided to take matters into our own hands. We poisoned her. As a result, Loki has a very reasonable response. Burns their city to the ground and slaughters them all like cattle. A reasonable crash out as Loki cries out to the heavens. He says, you better tell me that Ida isn't gonna die, because that woman is the only mother I've ever had. And Loki's right. He even tells them, My birth mother threw me off a mountain. There's absolutely no way to call that person a parent, let alone a mother. And yeah, Loki's perfectly reasonable crash out. So, that's probably why Loki goes around burning things to the ground. I'm even going to go as far as to say that might be the reason Loki's chained to a tree, is he probably burnt the place to the ground or did something crazy, probably went on a rampage after Ida eventually does pass away, and maybe that's how Shanks defeats him, becomes one of the four emperors of the sea. Loki ends up getting chained up to a tree, and that's when Loki ends up with his pen pal, Shaggy. So, that's where the chapter ends, but I did want to focus on two things specifically. I'll start with the one I kind of already touched on. Who is Shanks' mom? Obviously, Shanks' mom has some kind of significance to the plot. Otherwise, we wouldn't be focusing so much on the red hair, which was what we discussed in God Valley, as well as the fact that Harold seems to recognize him and Shamrock, respectively. Either that, or Shamrock has some kind of copy power that allows him a second... No, because the Shanks actually does have a conversation with Shamrock, so... Regardless, I think Shanks' mom is important, and I'm very interested to see how Shanks went from super cool cabin boy of the Roger Pirates, with the captain's dream and the straw hat and all that, to terrible, terrible celestial dragon who wants to become one of the God's Knights, to lowly pirate once again who stole the Gum Gum fruit, to Four Emperor of the Sea. Shanks' story is going to be a wild ride, and I think we are getting closer to the Shanks flashback. Closer as One Piece standards go. Something tells me we are going to get no context about this for Shanks for a couple years. I look forward to seeing everybody else's theory videos on this. Personally, I think I need a little more data before I make any rash decisions. But as it stands right now, I think Shanks' mom is important, and I'm really, really looking forward to Shanks' flashback now. The other thing I want to touch on is Loki and Shirahoshi. Because if they were betrothed to each other, the Fishman Empire and the Giants of Elbaf would be one of the most terrifying combinations that the world government would ever have to deal with. Mind you, the world government can't really do much to the Fishman people except for oppress them on land. Fishmen and merfolk can go anywhere. In a world that we know is sinking, that's terrifying. You're in their kingdom once this happens. On the other end, giants are giants. So I can see why this would be a very powerful alliance. To the people out there who have brought to the attention the fact that Loki is 60 years old and Shirahoshi is 16, you have to keep in mind that giants age differently. If you go by the standard of their physical years of existence on the blue planet, you then have to acknowledge that Colin and Nami are a shippable pair because they're both 20. Mind you, Colin mentally is a 7-year-old. In giant standards, Loki is about 20. In, Fishman standards, Shirahoshi is about 16. It's the difference between a senior in high school and a freshman in high school. A lot of maturing, a lot of growing up to do, but 10 years from now, when Loki is the equivalent of a 23-year-old and Shirahoshi is the equivalent of a 20-year-old, what I'm saying is, for those of you out there who are about to ship Loki and Shirahoshi, give it time and you'll be okay. What I'm really interested in is how Shirahoshi becomes Loki's pen pal and how Loki ends up betrothed to Lola for a moment. I think what happens is when Loki gets chained up, they give him a transponder snail. He uses it to contact the only friend that he has left, which is King Neptune or whoever's on the other end of this snail. That person ends up being Shirahoshi, who, mind you, during this time was locked in a tower. Now, Shirahoshi in the modern setting is currently not locked in a tower, but we don't really know how long Loki has been talking to this pen pal. He's clearly on a friendly basis with them because he calls them Shaggy, but this might actually be what's happening. It might be Loki and Shirahoshi are pen pals. In fact, while Shirahoshi was locked in a tower dreaming of the outside world, dreaming of seeing a tree, dreaming of what little girls dream of, I don't know, falling in love or, going on adventures. What better adventure than vicariously listening to your friend Loki on the other end of your pen pal snail, who's telling you about this girl named Lola he's got a crush on. Shirahoshi tells him to go for it, and Loki goes for it. I'm very interested in seeing this little relationship. I'm hoping it is actually Shirahoshi on the other end, because that would be kind of cool. If it turns out to be Neptune, that's fine as well, because I would assume Shaggy is probably a nickname that Harold had for Neptune as they were younger and they were friends. Or it could be Shirahoshi as a joke for the fact that her dad is very hairy. But that's pretty much all I have to talk about on this subject. Not really much else to say here. My question to you guys is, how do you think Lola ended up becoming the object of Loki's affection? Because I'm a little confused on that myself, because the timelines are getting shorter and shorter, and we are currently at, 15 years ago. Not much time left. Shirahoshi is currently a year old. So, yeah. How did they fall in love? Well, I guess they didn't fall in love because Lola said no thank you. But also, Lola was in Whole Cake Island. She was in that area because then she left. Because we see little Pudding as Lola sets off to sea. So did Loki go visit? Or was this... I don't know. However it happens, let me know in the comments below how you think it happened, because I'm very interested. Thank you for watching as always, and I will see you in the next video. This is the Hero of Julios, Xing out.